The desperation of the galaxy. The galaxy was on the edge of collapse. For years, a ruthless alien race known as the Zaran had waged war against the peaceful civilizations of the galaxy. Planets that once thrived with life and culture were now reduced to ashes, their cities lying in ruins. The Zaran's technology was far beyond anything the galaxy's other races had ever seen. No one knew where they had come from, but their power was undeniable. The Galactic Council, a group of the most powerful leaders from the galaxy's largest empires, had tried everything to stop the Zaran. They had sent fleets to fight back, but they were wiped out in minutes. They had tried diplomacy, sending emissaries to negotiate peace, but the Zaran responded with nothing but violence. The galaxy's leaders were desperate. The last hope for peace seemed impossible, but they had one option left. Inside the massive council chamber, the air was thick with tension. The room was filled with alien leaders from all corners of the galaxy. They sat around a long circular table, their faces filled with fear and uncertainty. There was only one question on their minds. What could they do to survive? "We are running out of time," said High Chancellor Trix, the leader of the Uraxis Empire. His voice echoed in the silence of the room. "Our fleets are all but gone. Our planets are being consumed by their forces. We can no longer fight this alone." The council members nodded grimly. Each of them had lost something to the Zaran. Their cities, their people, their homes. They had tried everything and had failed. But there was still one last hope, something they had never considered before. Trix stood up, pacing in front of the group. "We need to send a message," he said. "A call for help. There is one species we haven't considered. A species we once thought too primitive to be of any use. But perhaps they are our only hope." A murmur ran through the room. The idea was ludicrous. The humans of Earth were far behind the rest of the galaxy in terms of technology. They had only just begun to explore the stars, and their greatest weapons were nothing compared to the Zaran's destructive power. Many of the council members were quick to dismiss the idea. "Are you suggesting we ask them for help?" asked Lord Vashur of the Takron Dominion. His voice was filled with disbelief. "The humans are nothing compared to us. They can't possibly fight the Zaran." Trix looked directly at him. "I know how it sounds, but we have no choice. We need their help, or we are all doomed. We can't afford to ignore any possibility." The council was divided. Some were still skeptical, but others realized that desperate times called for desperate measures. They debated for hours, discussing the potential risks and rewards of involving humanity in the war. Finally, the decision was made. The council voted unanimously to send the message. But they were careful, too careful. They didn't want to show how desperate they had become. The message would be brief and to the point. They would not ask for an army, just for Earth to send any help they could spare. The transmission was sent through the galaxy's communication network, aimed at the homeworld of humanity, Earth. The message was simple, yet desperate. "We are on the brink of destruction. The Zaran are unstoppable. We have no more options. Help us, Earth, please." As the message was sent, the council members sat back, hoping against hope that humanity would respond. But deep down, many of them doubted that the humans would even care. They were so far behind, their technology so limited. How could they possibly stand up to an enemy like the Zaran? Unbeknownst to the council, however, humanity had been preparing for something far greater than they could ever imagine. Suspense. As the message reached Earth, a hidden network of humanity's best minds was already working tirelessly in secret. A fleet was being constructed in the shadows, far away from prying eyes. It was a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The humans had long kept their true potential hidden, not out of fear, but because they had not yet needed to reveal it. But now, with the galaxy's future at stake, Earth's true strength was about to be unleashed. No one knew yet, but in just a few short days, the humans would answer the call. And when they did, everything would change. The hidden power of Earth. The days passed slowly after the message was sent. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, and the Council's decision to reach out to Earth seemed like their last gamble. The Zaran continued their conquest, their fleets moving relentlessly across the stars. Whole star systems were falling under their control, and the once proud empires of the galaxy were on the verge of collapse. In the quiet of a small, isolated military facility on Earth, something was stirring. Hidden deep underground, away from the public eye, humanity's greatest secret was coming to life. It was a place few knew about, a place known only to a select few within Earth's military and scientific communities. For years, they had worked in silence, knowing the galaxy would one day need them. Now, that day had arrived. General Samuel Blackwood, a battle-hardened leader of Earth's military forces, stood before a massive holographic map. It was a map of the galaxy, showing the current positions of the Zaran fleets and the dying resistance. His hands hovered over the controls as he zoomed in on a distant system. The Zaran were everywhere. But what struck him the most was the Council's message, a call for help, sent in the darkest hour. "We have to be ready," he muttered to himself, his voice low but firm. They don't know what's coming. Around him, a team of scientists and engineers worked tirelessly, their eyes fixed on their screens as they monitored the systems that would soon come online. A massive fleet was under construction, one that would make the galaxy's greatest warships look like toys. Earth had spent years in secret, developing technology far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their scientists had made breakthroughs in energy manipulation, advanced weaponry, and faster-than-light travel. Now, all of that research was coming to fruition. "We've got one shot at this," said Dr. Ava Trent, Earth's leading scientist. She was standing next to General Blackwood, her eyes focused on the data in front of her. "If we don't act fast, the galaxy's dead. And so are we." Blackwood nodded. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on his shoulders. If the Zaran were allowed to continue their rampage, there would be no stopping them. But if they succeeded, humanity's place in the galaxy would be forever changed. Earth would go from a forgotten, backward planet to the center of a new galactic order. "We'll need to move fast," General Blackwood said. "As soon as we have the fleet ready, we launch." But there were challenges. Earth's fleet was still far from complete. The ships were powerful, but they were not fully tested. Many of the weapons had never been fired in battle, and there were still gaps in their defenses. But Earth had one advantage no one could have predicted: determination. The moment the Council's message had arrived, Earth's leaders had made the decision to go all in. They knew the galaxy was counting on them, but more than that, they knew they couldn't afford to fail. Humanity had never backed down from a challenge. And now, it was time to prove it once again. On the surface of Earth, citizens were unaware of the secret war being fought beneath their feet. People continued their lives, going to work, living their routines, unaware that the future of the galaxy rested in the hands of their species. However, there were whispers of something big happening. Rumors circulated about strange ships being seen in the skies, of unusual military activity in the remote corners of the planet. The leaders of Earth knew they had to keep the information hidden. Panic would only cause chaos. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Council members waited anxiously. They had sent the message, but they knew that even if humanity responded, there was no guarantee they would succeed. The Zaran were powerful, and no one had ever faced an enemy like them. The Council had placed their last hope in Earth, but they were afraid that their faith might be misplaced. The Zaran, meanwhile, continued to advance, unaware of the new threat that was about to emerge. They had their eyes set on the galaxy's heart, where the richest worlds and most powerful fleets resided. They were confident of their victory. No one had ever stood up to them, and the Zaran were sure this time would be no different. But the galaxy's future was about to take an unexpected turn. The first strike. The fleet was ready. Massive ships, gleaming under the artificial lights of Earth's secret hangars, stood like giants in waiting. General Blackwood stood in front of the fleet, his face stone cold as he surveyed the vessels. He could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. Humanity had never been in a position like this before, on the edge of being the galaxy's last hope. It was time to move. "We launch in 20 minutes, Blackwood ordered, his voice firm and commanding. "Make sure everything is in place. We can't afford any mistakes." His eyes lingered on the ships one last time. They were a blend of human ingenuity and alien technology, a perfect combination of the best Earth had to offer and the knowledge gathered from the remnants of old wars. Some of the ships were more like war machines than vessels, armed with weapons no one had ever seen before. Earth's scientists had worked tirelessly, pushing the limits of what was possible, and now the result was before them. On the other side of the galaxy, the Zaran were advancing, their fleets spread across star systems like a wave about to crash. They were unaware of the coming storm, of the hidden fleet that was ready to make its move. Humanity's first step into galactic conflict would soon shake the Zaran to their core. General Blackwood made his way to the command center. Dr. Ava Trent, her face tense with concentration, was at the helm, overseeing the final preparations. "General, everything's set," she said, her eyes darting across the control panels. "We're good to go. The fleet's warp drives are primed and ready." Blackwood nodded. "Prepare for launch. Initiate the countdown." As the countdown began, Blackwood turned to the viewing window, watching the fleet's ships lift off one by one. The hangar doors opened with a soft hum, revealing the dark expanse of space beyond. The silence was overwhelming, but soon that silence would be shattered. The Zaran's surprise. Light years away, The Zaran were moving through the star system at full speed. Their enormous battle cruisers glided through space, each ship bristling with weapons designed to crush anything in their path. The Zaran had been winning for years. No one had ever been able to stop them. They had wiped out entire civilizations, and their rule had become absolute. But as their fleet neared the edge of the system, something unusual appeared on their scanners. A small blip, barely noticeable at first, started to grow in size and speed. The Zaran's commanding officer, Admiral Gorek, studied the readout in disbelief. "Impossible," he muttered. "There shouldn't be anything here. No resistance. Nothing. It's just us." His second-in-command, an officer named Velari, stepped forward. "Should we investigate, Admiral? This could be a mistake in the sensors." Gorek grunted. "We have more important things to worry about. Push forward." But the blip grew larger, too quickly to ignore. Within minutes, the Zaran fleet was no longer alone. A massive armada had appeared out of nowhere, its ships gliding silently through the void, fast and precise. The lead ship in the fleet, a colossal warship, had a glowing symbol on its hull, an insignia the Zaran had never seen before. It was Earth's fleet, arriving in full force. A stunned silence fell over the Zaran bridge as the scale of the situation began to sink in. They had no idea Earth had been preparing such a fleet. No one had expected them to join the war, let alone with such force. The Zaran's arrogance, their belief in their unstoppable dominance, had blinded them to the potential threat of a species they had dismissed as insignificant. "Ready weapons," Admiral Gorek growled, snapping out of his initial shock. "Prepare to engage. We'll crush them like we have every other enemy." But even as the Zaran's warships powered up their weapons, they couldn't help but feel a hint of uncertainty. They had never fought anything like this before. These human ships were unlike anything they had ever seen. They were sleek and powerful, with weapons capable of devastating whole fleets. The Zaran had no idea what kind of war machines they were up against. Humanity's power revealed. Back on Earth, the fleet's first strike was underway. Blackwood and his crew watched the live feed of the battle unfold. Every ship, every weapon, had been carefully calibrated for maximum impact. This was their moment. The first salvo of energy blasts erupted from the human fleet, hitting the Zaran's lead battle cruiser with such force that it shuddered. The Zaran's ships returned fire immediately, but the human fleet was faster, more agile. Their new weapons, powered by advanced energy cores, tore through the Zaran defenses. It was a devastating show of power. "I've never seen anything like this," Dr. Trent whispered, her eyes wide as she watched the carnage. "They're pushing them back." The Zaran, once confident in their power, now found themselves fighting for their lives. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in a single moment. Earth had entered the war, and the tide was turning. For the first time in years, the Zaran felt fear. The tipping point. The battle had escalated quickly. What started as a surprising ambush had turned into a full-scale war, with Earth's fleet launching one strike after another, each more precise and devastating than the last. Yet, despite the overwhelming firepower and advanced technology, General Blackwood knew the war was far from over. The Zaran were regrouping, and their fleet was vast, too vast to be easily defeated. On the command bridge of the flagship Nemesis, Blackwood paced back and forth, his thoughts racing. He had never imagined humanity would find itself in a war like this, against an empire so powerful, yet so blind to the threat that Earth posed. But now that they were here, there was no turning back. "General, we're making progress, but the Zaran are regrouping faster than expected," Dr. Ava Trent said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "They're not just retreating, they're organizing a counterattack. Their fleet is bringing in reinforcements from nearby sectors." Blackwood's eyes narrowed. "They'll come at us with everything they've got. We need to hit them harder before they can form a proper defense. What's our status on the experimental weapons?" Dr. Trent looked at the screens around her. "The new energy weapons are ready, but we need to be cautious. They've never been tested in actual combat. If we unleash them now, it could turn the tide, or it could backfire." "Do we have any other choice?" Blackwood asked, his tone low but resolute. "If we don't push forward now, we risk losing everything we've gained." The tension in the room was palpable. The crew knew that they were walking the thin line. If Earth's fleet failed, the Zaran would be unstoppable. But if the experimental weapons worked, it could change the galaxy forever. The Zaran's counterattack. Admiral Gorek sat in his command chair, his claws gripping the armrests as he watched the reports flooding in. The humans had managed to damage several key ships, and their weapons had been more effective than the Zaran had anticipated. But the battle was far from over. "We need to hit back with everything we've got," Gorek growled, his voice like a rumble of thunder. Deploy the full fleet to the front lines. I want every ship in the sector ready to fire at will. These humans may have surprised us, but they will not win this war. His officers moved quickly, issuing commands and organizing the fleet's next steps. Gorak had never been one to underestimate his enemies, but the humans had thrown him off balance. He didn't know their true strength, and the unpredictability of their tactics was something the Zaran weren't used to. But that wouldn't stop him. The Zaran were relentless, and he had no intention of letting a small fleet of humans stand in the way of his empire. A shocking discovery. Back on Earth's flagship, Dr. Trent's team had made an alarming discovery. The Zaran's communications network was more advanced than they had thought. Through careful analysis, they realized that the Zaran had a secret weapon, a weapon capable of disabling Earth's ships from a distance. "This is bad," Dr. Trent muttered, her eyes scanning the data in disbelief. "If the Zaran deploy this weapon, it could cripple our fleet in an instant. We won't be able to fight back." Blackwood rushed to her side, his mind already working through the possible solutions. "How soon can they launch it?" "It's already in position," Trent replied, her voice tight with urgency. "We need to find a way to disable it before they fire." Blackwood's mind raced. Earth's fleet was still on the offensive, but now they had a ticking clock. If they didn't act quickly, the Zaran could wipe out their advantage with one swift move. "We'll launch a special mission to take out the weapon," Blackwood said. "Gather a team. We'll infiltrate the Zaran lines and destroy their weapon before it can do any damage. This battle may be our only chance." Humanity's resolve. As the mission was prepared, Earth's fleet continued to hold its ground. Facing down wave after wave of Zaran attacks, the human ships were holding steady, but Blackwood knew that they couldn't afford to wait much longer. He looked out across the bridge, seeing the determined faces of his crew. This was it, humanity's moment to prove they were not just players in the galaxy, but forces to be reckoned with. "I'm counting on all of you," Blackwood said, his voice ringing out with quiet authority. "Our mission is to make sure that this battle isn't just a fight we survive. It's the beginning of a new era. Let the galaxy know. Earth is here, and we will not be ignored." The crew nodded, and one by one, the final preparations were made. The mission to take down the Zaran weapon would begin soon, and if they succeeded, it would give humanity the upper hand in the war. But failure was not an option. The unthinkable choice. The clock was ticking. Every second that passed brought Earth's fleet closer to a devastating fate as the Zaran prepared to unleash their deadly secret weapon. General Blackwood sat in his command chair, his eyes locked on the screens in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. The stakes had never been higher. Failure now would mean the complete annihilation of humanity's fleet and the loss of everything they had fought for. "We need to act now, General," Dr. Trent said, her voice cutting through the tension. "The Zaran are moving into position to launch their weapon. If we don't take it down within the next 15 minutes, we're done for." Blackwood's face was a mask of resolve, but inside, his thoughts were running wild. There was no time for hesitation. The operation to destroy the Zaran weapon had already begun, but with each passing minute, it was becoming more clear that their mission was risky, almost too risky. If they failed, there would be no second chance. "Status on the infiltration team?" Blackwood asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. "They're in position, General," one of the officers reported, "but the Zaran defenses are heavier than expected. It's going to be close." Blackwood's hands tightened around the arms of his chair. His team was infiltrating the Zaran lines, but it was impossible to predict what might happen. The enemy's defenses were unlike anything Earth had encountered before, but failure was not an option. Humanity's future depended on this mission. A dangerous gamble. The atmosphere aboard the flagship Nemesis was electric with anticipation. Every crew member, every officer, knew that this mission wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for humanity's place in the galaxy. The thought that they might fail was too much to bear, but even worse was the thought that they had no choice but to try. "General," Dr. Trent said as she approached, her voice laced with concern. "I've been running the numbers, and I need to be blunt. If we continue this attack, we're going to risk everything. If we fail, Earth's fleet will be destroyed. But if we pull back now, we may have a chance to regroup." Blackwood's eyes locked onto hers, his gaze unwavering. "If we pull back now, we'll never have a chance to fight again. The Zaran will sweep through us and crush any hope we have of surviving. There is no retreat." Dr. Trent's expression softened, but she didn't argue. She knew Blackwood was right. Retreat was not an option. But what they were about to do, the mission to destroy the Zaran's weapon, was the most dangerous gamble humanity had ever taken. A single misstep, and everything could be lost. The final assault. Elsewhere, the infiltration team moved swiftly through the Zaran territory. Stealth and speed were their greatest advantages. They knew that any sign of their presence would trigger an overwhelming response from the enemy, so they made every step count. Led by Captain Marcus Wright, the team was composed of Earth's best soldiers, trained to face any challenge. Their objective was clear: destroy the Zaran weapon at all costs. "We're in position," Captain Wright said, his voice calm but tense. "It's just ahead. The Zaran are heavily patrolling the area, but we've got the element of surprise." Wright signaled for his team to move forward. They crept through the dense metallic corridors of the Zaran warship, each footstep taken with extreme care. The air was thick with the scent of fear and anticipation. They were moments away from their target, but the closer they got, the more they felt the weight of their task. The Zaran's weapon could destroy Earth's entire fleet, and possibly the entire planet, if they failed to disable it. As they neared the central chamber where the weapon was housed, Wright's hand signaled the team to stop. He peered through a small window into the command room. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Zaran were waiting for them, waiting to stop them before they could destroy the weapon. "We've been compromised," Wright whispered. "They know we're here." A fight for survival. The infiltration team's stealth mission had turned into a desperate fight for survival. The Zaran soldiers were closing in fast, and their firepower was far superior to anything Earth's soldiers had faced before. Despite the shock of the ambush, Captain Wright remained calm. "We move in now," Wright shouted, drawing his weapon. "We can't let them stop us." The team charged forward, guns blazing as they fought their way into the heart of the Zaran's defense. Each soldier knew they might not make it out alive, but they pressed on with one singular purpose: to save humanity. Back aboard the Nemesis, General Blackwood was watching the progress of the mission, his fingers crossed. He knew the odds were against them, but there was no other choice. The Zaran were moments away from deploying their weapon, and the team on the ground was humanity's last hope. The tension builds. Minutes passed in agonizing silence. The Zaran's weapon was now almost ready to fire. Earth's fleet had engaged in full combat, trying to hold the line, but without the success of the mission, there was no hope of victory. General Blackwood watched as every possible scenario played out in his mind, but there was one constant truth: humanity had never backed down before, and now was not the time to start. "Do we have any word from the team?" he asked urgently. A communications officer looked up. "Still nothing, sir. They're in too deep." The minutes stretched on. The fate of humanity was in the hands of a small team, miles away, fighting to save everything. Would they succeed? Or was this the last battle humanity would ever fight? The final push. The seconds dragged on like hours. Inside the Zaran warship, Captain Marcus Wright and his team were deep within enemy territory. Their every move met with opposition. The Zaran had already deployed heavy reinforcements, and the once quiet corridors of the ship now echoed with the sounds of gunfire and explosions. The soldiers pushed forward with unwavering determination, but they were losing precious time. "We're almost there," shouted Sergeant Leah Adams, her voice strained but determined. "Just a few more corridors, and we'll reach the main control room." But even as she spoke, the air around them grew thick with danger. The Zaran were relentless, and every turn, every corner seemed to bring them closer to total annihilation. The team was running low on ammo, and their energy reserves were almost depleted. Yet they refused to stop. They had no choice but to finish the mission. Marcus, leading from the front, glanced back at his team. "Keep moving. We can't afford to fail now." His words were the spark that kept their resolve burning. They had already come this far, through hell and back, and they weren't about to let it all fall apart in the final moments. A terrifying revelation. As they moved forward, the last door between them and the Zaran's most powerful weapon loomed before them. But something felt off. Marcus' instincts screamed at him, urging him to take a step back, to reassess their strategy. The Zaran were too quiet, too still. "We've been set up," Marcus whispered, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the area. The team stopped dead in their tracks. His words sent a chill through the group. They had been walking right into a trap. The Zaran had lured them in, knowing full well that Earth's best soldiers would never give up, never retreat. And now they had them cornered. The walls of the corridor seemed to close in around them as enemy soldiers moved in from every direction. "It's a dead end," Sergeant Adams hissed, pulling out a grenade. "We're trapped." A desperate stand. "Fall back," Marcus yelled. "Regroup at the last intersection." But as the team began to retreat, the Zaran moved with terrifying speed. They had anticipated this. They had always anticipated this. The ambush was no longer just a fight for the weapon. It was a fight for survival. The team had been too successful, and the Zaran were now hellbent on making sure they would not escape. The sounds of battle grew louder. Explosions rocked the hallways. The lights flickered above them, and debris rained down as the team pushed their way through. But with every step they took, the Zaran soldiers grew closer. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. "This is it," Sergeant Adams muttered, firing a blast into the nearest enemy soldier. "We fight to the end." Marcus looked at his team. They were battered, tired, but their faces burned with the same unbreakable determination they had carried since the beginning. Humanity would never stop fighting. The light at the end of the tunnel. Back aboard the Nemesis, General Blackwood had been watching the situation unfold in real time. Every delay, every lost minute, brought them closer to a certain doom. The Zaran weapon was now fully powered up and locked onto Earth's fleet. One shot, and it would all be over. The battle would be lost, the human race wiped out. There was no turning back now. "We've lost contact with the infiltration team," an officer said grimly. "We've lost all communication with Captain Wright and his team." Blackwood gritted his teeth. He had to hold on to hope. He had to trust that they could still make it. If not, humanity was doomed. "We won't lose them," Blackwood said, his voice filled with determination. "Not now. Not ever." An unexpected savior. Then, out of nowhere, the unexpected happened. Just as the team reached the very last stretch of the Zaran-controlled ship, an overwhelming burst of firepower erupted from the far end of the corridor. The sudden attack threw the Zaran into chaos. For a split second, Marcus and his team froze, not understanding what was happening. But then they saw it. Earth's fleet, led by the Nemesis, was coming to their rescue. It wasn't just a single strike. It was a full-scale offensive. A wave of ships, powerful and relentless, unleashed everything they had onto the Zaran. Blackwood had never been one to give up on a mission. He knew that time was running out. And when the chance came, he ordered the fleet to hit the Zaran from all sides. The Zaran, caught off guard and unprepared, were forced to retreat. "What the hell? How did they find us?" Sergeant Adams gasped, barely able to believe what she was witnessing. Marcus smiled grimly. Looks like General Blackwood had one last trick up his sleeve. The battlefield erupted into chaos as Earth's forces clashed with the Zaran. But for the first time in hours, there was hope. Humanity wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The final countdown. With the arrival of the fleet, the odds were beginning to shift. The Zaran had underestimated the sheer willpower of humanity. Their reinforcements were now fighting for their lives. The infiltration team, though battered, pushed forward, now with a second wind. They weren't done yet. They had a weapon to destroy, and they were determined to see it through. But even as the battle raged on, the weapon on the Zaran ship was still primed and ready to fire. It was now or never. Time was running out. Marcus turned to his team one last time. "This is it," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "We either win or we die trying." And with that, the final assault on the Zaran weapon began. The final confrontation. The Zaran weapon hummed ominously, its destructive power barely contained, waiting to unleash hell upon Earth. Inside the enemy ship, Marcus and his team raced through the corridors, their footsteps echoing as they neared the control room. Time was running out, and every second they wasted could cost them the battle, and the lives of everyone they had fought to protect. "We're almost there," Sergeant Adams whispered, her voice tight with determination. "We've made it this far. We can't fail now." Marcus nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon as they rounded the final corner. The door to the control room loomed ahead, guarded by Zaran soldiers, their weapons raised and ready. There was no turning back. The team had come too far, sacrificed too much to let this mission fail. "Get ready," Marcus whispered, signaling his team to take cover. "On my mark." A desperate final push. As the door slid open, the team stormed in, firing immediately at the Zaran soldiers inside. The battle was fierce. Gunfire rang out, and explosions rocked the room as the Zaran fought to hold their ground. But they were overwhelmed. Humanity's finest soldiers, led by Marcus, were too skilled, too determined. The Zaran had no idea what they were up against. Sergeant Adams moved swiftly, taking down one enemy soldier after another, while Corporal Thompson provided covering fire from the rear. Marcus, ever the leader, moved through the chaos with laser focus. His team was relentless, their movements almost synchronized as they cleared the room. But the Zaran had one last trick up their sleeve. "Shut it down. Now," Marcus yelled as he rushed toward the central console. The countdown on the screen was nearly complete. If they didn't act fast, Earth would be destroyed. The ultimate sacrifice. Just as Marcus reached the console, a massive explosion shook the room. A Zaran soldier, having hidden behind a column, launched a final desperate attack, sending a blast directly at Marcus. The explosion knocked him to the ground, his body battered and bloodied. For a moment, everything went silent. "Captain!" Sergeant Adams screamed, rushing to his side. But Marcus, though badly wounded, refused to give up. He gritted his teeth, pushing himself up from the floor. The weapon, shut it down. His voice was barely a whisper, but the intensity in his eyes told his team everything they needed to know. "We need to stop it now," Thompson shouted, panic rising in his voice. Adams, without hesitation, moved to the control panel, typing in the deactivation code. Sweat poured down her face as the seconds ticked away. The countdown clock flashed red. Seconds left. Just as the last number on the countdown hit 0, Adams slammed her hand onto the final button. The weapon powered down with a resounding thud, the hum of its energy dissipating into the air. Silence fell over the room. They had done it. Earth was safe, for now. The price of victory. But victory had come at a steep cost. Marcus, though victorious, was severely injured. The blast had nearly taken him out, and it was clear that he wouldn't be able to continue fighting. Sergeant Adams, though relieved, couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. The Zaran forces were retreating, but their commanders had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity was not to be underestimated. The war had only just begun. As Marcus was carefully helped to his feet by his team, General Blackwood's voice crackled through the comms. "Mission successful, team. You've saved Earth. But don't think this is over. The Zaran will regroup, and when they do, they'll be back with a vengeance." The unexpected arrival. As Marcus and his team prepared to leave the control room, a new presence arrived. The fleet of Earth's finest ships had arrived just in time to see the Zaran retreat. The Nemesis led the charge, its guns blazing as it pushed the Zaran forces out of Earth's space. The skies above Earth, once dark and filled with the threat of destruction, now gleamed with the light of victory. But even as the cheers began to rise from the fleet, Marcus knew that this was only one victory in a much larger war. The Zaran had tasted humanity's strength, and they would return. The battle for Earth had only just begun. The road ahead, with the weapon deactivated and the Zaran pushed back, Marcus and his team knew that they had bought humanity some time. But this victory would not last forever. The Zaran would return, stronger and more determined than before. "We've won this round," Marcus said, looking at his team. "But the war isn't over, not by a long shot." The team nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. They had fought hard, and they had won. But the real fight was just beginning. As the fleet prepared for the next battle, Earth stood united, stronger than ever. The Zaran had learned a hard lesson today, but they had also seen humanity's strength. And the next time they came, they would face an Earth ready for whatever came their way. The galaxy had just witnessed the rise of a new power. And this time, it wasn't the Zaran. It was humanity.